The galaxy was vast, filled with countless stars and civilizations. At its heart lay the Zark's dominion, an empire ruled by fear, strength, and precision. The Zarks were a species evolved for war, tall, armored beings with minds honed for conquest. Their fleets had swept through countless systems, leaving ash and submission in their wake. At the pinnacle of their command stood General Vorik, a name whispered with dread across the galaxy. Undefeated, unstoppable, and relentless. In the war room aboard the flagship Dominatus, Vorik stood with calculated poise, his crimson eyes fixed on the holographic display of an ongoing campaign. Dozens of planets blinked red, each a conquered prize under Zark's control. Only a few flickered green, stubborn pockets of resistance that barely warranted attention. One of those stubborn pockets was Earth, a blue dot that should have fallen long ago. Vorik's voice, deep and commanding, cut through the room. Report. A subordinate officer, hesitant but obedient, stepped forward. General, the human forces have repelled our latest assault near the Perseid sector. Silence followed, heavy and unnatural. Vorik's gaze darkened. Explain. The officer fumbled for words. Their tactics are unconventional. They operate in ways that defy our projections. Ambushes, diversions, and enough, Vorik growled, silencing the officer. His mind churned. The Zarks had fought countless species, each predictable in their desperation to survive. But humans? They were different. Primitive technology, inferior weapons, and yet, they were winning battles they had no right to win. Vorik's claws tapped rhythmically against the console. A minor anomaly, he declared, though the weight in his voice betrayed unease. We will crush them soon enough. But even as he spoke, doubt lingered. The galaxy respected brute force, yet the humans thrived on something far more insidious, cunning. The whispers of a human strategist had reached even Vorik's ears, a faceless figure who orchestrated these improbable victories. In the cold void of space, strength alone had always prevailed. But now, for the first time in his long and decorated career, General Vorik felt the flicker of something foreign, something unsettling. It was fear. And though he would never admit it, he knew deep down that this fear stemmed from one simple truth: a human with a plan was more dangerous than any war machine the Zarks had ever faced. Word of the human resistance spread like wildfire through the galaxy. At first, no one believed it. How could a primitive species defy the might of the Zark's dominion? Their ships were outdated, their weapons crude. Yet battle after battle, the impossible happened. The invincible war machine of the Zarks faltered against an enemy that shouldn't have stood a chance. At the heart of this resistance was a figure shrouded in mystery, Commander Elias Kane. His name carried no weight among the stars, but on Earth, he was known as a genius of strategy. Kane had spent his life studying conflict, not for glory, but to understand the patterns that governed war. And it was this understanding that allowed humanity to do what no other species had done: outthink the Zarks. Kane didn't fight battles conventionally. He knew humans couldn't match the Zarks head-on. Instead, he turned the galaxy itself into his weapon. Ambushes in asteroid fields, feigned retreats that lured Zarks fleets into solar flares, and sabotage missions that crippled their supply lines. The Zarks, accustomed to brute force dominance, found themselves blindsided by ingenuity. Every move Kane made was calculated to sow confusion and fear. He exploited the arrogance of the Zarks, who believed their superiority was unassailable. Their overconfidence became their greatest weakness. Kane's tactics weren't just about winning battles, they were about dismantling the enemy's sense of invincibility. Reports flooded into the Zarks' high command, entire fleets lost without explanation, strategic outposts reduced to rubble. Vorik's frustration grew with each defeat. The mighty general, who had never tasted failure, now faced a foe he couldn't predict. Kane never sought the spotlight. His face was rarely seen, even by his own forces. But his presence was felt in every victory, every cunning maneuver that turned the tide in humanity's favor. The soldiers who followed him believed in something greater than survival. They believed in triumph against impossible odds. And the galaxy watched in disbelief as a species once considered insignificant began to rise. Kane's brilliance proved that battles were not won by technology alone, but by the minds that wielded it. For the Zarks, this was a revelation they were unprepared for. And for General Vorik, it was a threat unlike any he had ever faced. Vorik stood on the bridge of his flagship, his gaze fixed on the swirling expanse of space. He had grown tired of distant reports and faceless defeats. This time, he would oversee the battle himself. The human strategist had become more than a nuisance, he was a threat to the Dominion's supremacy. Vorik's pride demanded retribution. The coordinates were clear. A remote station at the edge of contested space, a seemingly insignificant outpost. Yet Vorik knew it was a trap. He welcomed it. Better to face the enemy in the open than to be bled dry by shadowy tactics. The Zark's fleet, sleek and menacing, descended upon the station in perfect formation. Vorik's orders were precise. No mercy, no hesitation. Laser fire ripped through the void, pulverizing the outer defenses. The humans would be crushed beneath the weight of superior firepower. But as the dust cleared, Vorik sensed something was wrong. The station was empty, eerily silent. No distress signals, no desperate transmissions. Only a calm, calculated quiet. Then it happened. Invisible mines detonated within the Zark's formation, tearing through the fleet with surgical precision. Ships listed and exploded as chaos erupted among the ranks. Vorik's voice thundered over the command channel, rallying his forces. Reform. Do not scatter. But the trap was already sprung. From the darkness of space, human ships emerged, small and nimble, weaving through the disarray. They struck with ruthless efficiency, targeting key systems and vanishing before retaliation was possible. Vorik's claws clenched as he watched his fleet unravel. This was no ordinary ambush, it was a masterpiece of strategic brilliance. Every move had been anticipated, every weakness exploited. The human strategist had turned the battlefield into a canvas, and Vorik was the unwitting subject of his art. "General, we must retreat," an officer shouted. "Silence," Vorik roared. "We fight." But even as he spoke, Vorik knew the truth. They had already lost. The humans weren't just fighting, they were dismantling the very foundation of Zark's dominance. Vorik's strength had always been his ability to adapt, but now he found himself outmatched, not by superior weapons, but by a mind that saw 10 steps ahead. As the remnants of his fleet limped away from the battlefield, Vorik's mind churned. This defeat was a wound to his pride, but more than that, it was a revelation. The humans were no longer a minor nuisance, they were a force to be reckoned with. And at their helm stood a single mind capable of reshaping the very nature of war. Vorik had faced countless enemies in his lifetime, but none like this. The human with a plan had done what no other had dared, he had made the mighty General Vorik doubt himself. The remnants of the Zark's fleet drifted through space, battered and broken. General Vorik stood in silence, staring at the flickering holographic map of the Galactic sector. The red symbols of Zark's control had been steadily replaced by a growing sea of green. Humanity was no longer a mere resistance, they were a rising power. And Vorik, once the galaxy's most feared tactician, had become their cautionary tale. News of the defeat spread like a shockwave across the Dominion. The once unassailable Zarks were now viewed as vulnerable, their reputation shattered. Allied species began questioning their loyalty to the Empire, and insurgencies sprang up across occupied worlds. Vorik had always believed that fear was the ultimate tool of control, but now that fear was slipping from his grasp. The human forces capitalized on their momentum. They didn't seek galactic domination, they sought freedom and security. Yet their victories inspired countless others. A movement had begun, one fueled not by conquest, but by the idea that even the weak could rise against the strong with the right leader. In his private chamber, Vorik reviewed footage from the last battle. He replayed every maneuver, every calculated strike orchestrated by the human commander. His claws flexed in frustration, but deep within, there was a glimmer of admiration. The human had done something no other foe had managed, he had forced Vorik to think beyond brute force. A communication request interrupted his thoughts. It was from a Zark's War Council member, their tone urgent. "General, we must regroup and retaliate before the humans gain complete dominance." Vorik's response was measured. Retaliation without understanding leads only to more defeat. We have underestimated them for too long. Then what do you propose? The council member demanded. Vorok's eyes narrowed. We learn. We adapt. And perhaps, we negotiate. The words tasted bitter, but Vorok knew the truth. The era of unchallenged Zark supremacy was over. Strength alone was no longer enough. The humans had shown that the mind was the ultimate weapon. As the communication ended, Vorok stood tall, his resolve unbroken. He was a warrior, yes, but now he was also a student. The human commander had taught him a lesson he would never forget. In the end, it wasn't about victory or defeat, it was about evolution. And while Vorok's pride bore the scars of failure, his mind had been sharpened by the experience. Far across the galaxy, Commander Elias Kane observed the retreat of the Zark's fleet with quiet satisfaction. He knew the war was far from over, but humanity had secured its place among the stars. They had faced the greatest threat the galaxy had known and emerged stronger for it. Because in the vast, unforgiving expanse of space, the most dangerous thing wasn't strength, it was a mind with a plan. And now, both humanity and the Zarks knew it well.